Defense, would you like to make an opening statement or not?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, whenever you're ready.
2 weeks, 11 rooms, 20,000 minutes, and 0 evidence. Mr. Chandler just stood before you and told you a pretty tall tale about my client, Mr. Ocean. One in which Mr. Ocean is the villain straight out of a Hollywood blockbuster. Apparently, he managed, from prison, under constant surveillance, to plan a vault heist on a high-security casino for $160 million in cash. You see, in the government story today, Mr. Ocean gets released from prison and stays at the hotel, the scene of the crime, for 2 weeks. That's over 20,000 minutes. And somehow, he doesn't leave behind a single strand of hair, a single skin cell, doesn't appear on a second of surveillance footage in the casino. Now, I'll give it to Mr. Chandler. Mr. Ocean, he does have a history of theft. But the reality of the story isn't quite as glamorous as the government would have you believe. Mr. Ocean's no magician, no illusionist. In reality, he's a man in love. He neglected his marriage and came to Vegas to meet up with his wife and make amends. You'll hear testimony from my client today that's going to prove that that is the reason that Mr. Ocean was at the New York Hotel and Casino. That he was there to win back the love of his life, Tess Ocean. Of course, that's not what the government wants you to hear. They're here to convince you that Mr. Ocean committed grand theft and conspiracy, 2 separate charges. And with each charge the government levies, they take on a burden to prove each element of the 2 charges. They have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the highest standard in our legal system. It's not beyond a possibility or even a probability. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. Now let's talk about exactly what elements the government has to prove to you today, starting with the grand theft charge. First, the government must prove that the defendant took possession of property. Second, that the property was valued at more than $1,000. Third, that the property was owned by somebody else. Fourth, that Mr. Ocean took it without the owner's consent. Fifth, that he took it with the intent to permanently deprive the owner of the property. And sixth, that Mr. Ocean moved the property, even a small distance, and kept it for a period of time. Now, that's not the only thing the government has to prove. Moving to the conspiracy charge, they have to prove 2 things. First, that Mr. Ocean agreed with at least one other person to commit grand theft. And second, that at least one of those folks did something to commit grand theft. Now, the government needs to prove all 8 elements beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, right now, members of the jury, at this moment, Mr. Ocean is presumed innocent. Now, that's a privilege that all of us here today, all of us have. We're innocent until proven guilty. Mr. Ocean has rights that protect his interests, rights that say he can remain silent, that he can plead the fifth. He's never had any duty to cooperate with the police. Mr. Ocean chose to, time and time again. From the very beginning, he agreed to an interview, and today he'll take the stand. Mr. Ocean doesn't have a problem answering the government's questions because he's got nothing to hide. Now, as you listen to the evidence today, I want you to question how on earth Mr. Ocean was supposed to be planning this heist from prison. How could that have possibly happened? Obviously, members of the jury, conspiracy, requires communication. Now, I want you to ask yourself, is the government going to show you texts? Are they going to show you phone calls? Maybe something like old school paper and pen, a letter? Huh. Believe it or not, you're not going to see any kind of record of communication between Mr. Ocean and his alleged conspirators. Even if they tried to visit him in person, well, you're not going to see a prison visitor log to prove that. So right now, I'm going to ask you to ask why not. Now, in addition to the lack of evidence of conspiracy, consider a lack of physical evidence. I mean, maybe you walked into this trial expecting to find Mr. Ocean's DNA evidence in one of the 11 hotel rooms that the government claims the defendants were conspiring together in. I mean, maybe there would have been fingerprints found in the rooms, or somewhere around the casino, or in the vault where the theft took place. Hair fibers, any DNA. Huh. No doubts. The government won't be able to show you any of that. I'm so confident in this that right now, I'm going to issue a challenge to the government to, over the course of the trial, bring any piece of DNA or even digital forensic evidence that has my client's digital or literal footprint on it. I'm no gambling woman, members of the jury, but I'd take that bet because they won't be able to do it. 2 weeks. 7 of America's top investigators, 11 rooms, over 20,000 minutes of my client's time to sift through. They investigated. And what do they have to show for it? Nothing. And that's why, at the end of today's trial, well, I'm going to come before you again and ask that you find Mr. Ocean not guilty. Thank you.